My mother looked me dead in the eyes at my medical school graduation and said, "You'll never be a real doctor." 23 years later, those words still burned. But what hurt more was discovering she'd told everyone in our family that I dropped out, that I was working at a gas station, that I was the failure she always knew I'd be. I stood in the corner of my nephew's birthday party in Austin, watching her hold court with relatives who barely looked at me. She gestured wildly, telling another story about my supposed failures, while her friends nodded sympathetically. My sister Caroline laughed at something Mom said, then glanced my way with that familiar mix of pity and superiority. Nobody asked about my life anymore. They'd already decided who I was based on her stories. I smiled, sipped my punch, and said nothing. Silence had become my armor over the years. But in 3 days, everything would change. In 3 days, my mother would collapse at her book club meeting, and the hospital would make a call that would shatter every lie she'd spent 2 decades building. My name is Adrian Wallace, and I'm a cardiovascular surgeon at Memorial Hospital in Houston. I specialize in emergency cases, the ones where patients have minutes, not hours. I've performed over 2,000 surgeries in my career, saved lives that other doctors said were already lost. My success rate is 97%, which is exceptional in my field. But to my mother, Patricia Wallace, I might as well be invisible. It started when I was 17 and told her I wanted to be a doctor. She laughed, actually laughed, and said I wasn't smart enough for medical school. When I got accepted to Baylor College of Medicine, she told relatives I was going to community college. When I graduated with honors, she didn't come to the ceremony. Said she had a headache. My father had passed away when I was 15, so it was just her and me. Well, her, me, and Caroline, my older sister who could do no wrong. Caroline became a marketing executive, married a lawyer named Preston, had 2 perfect children. She lived 10 minutes from Mom in Austin. I lived 3 hours away in Houston, which suited everyone just fine. The lies started small. Mom would tell her friends I was still figuring things out when I was in my residency. She'd say I was between jobs when I was actually working 80-hour weeks at the hospital. By the time I finished my fellowship and became an attending surgeon, she'd constructed an entire alternate reality. In her version, I dropped out of medical school after 2 years. Couldn't handle the pressure. She'd explain with a sad shake of her head. Now I worked at a gas station in some small town, doing manual labor because I'd wasted my potential. She told this story so many times, so convincingly, that even distant relatives believed it. At family gatherings, they'd avoid asking about my career. Some would offer me money or job leads, thinking they were helping. Others just looked at me with disappointment, wondering how Patricia's son had turned out so differently from Caroline. I could have corrected them, could have shown them my medical license, my hospital ID, articles I'd published in medical journals. But something stopped me every time. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity about how far she'd take the lies. My mother had always been image-obsessed. Growing up, our house had to be perfect, our clothes had to be pressed, our achievements had to be impressive enough to brag about at her garden club meetings. My father used to soften her edges, make jokes that would ease the tension when she got too intense about appearances. After he died, there was no buffer anymore. Just Mom's relentless need to control how the world saw our family. Caroline fit the image perfectly. She was blonde, poised, married well, produced grandchildren. I was darker-haired like my father, quieter, more interested in science than socializing. When I chose medicine over business school, Mom saw it as a personal attack. Doctors are servants, she'd said. They take orders from administrators and insurance companies. Is that what you want? To be someone's employee? She wanted me to get an MBA, work in corporate America, make connections at country clubs. Medicine was beneath her vision for me. So when I pursued it anyway, she simply rewrote the narrative. If I wouldn't give her the son she wanted, she'd create a different story altogether. One where I'd failed, proved her right, and she could play the martyred mother with the disappointing child. The birthday party was at Caroline's house, a sprawling ranch-style home with a pool and professionally landscaped gardens. My nephew Marcus was turning 7. I'd brought him a chemistry set, the kind with real experiments, not the dumbed-down versions. Caroline accepted it with a tight smile, then set it aside like she might throw it away later. Adrian finally showed up, she announced to the room. We were starting to think you forgot. I'd arrived exactly on time, but I didn't argue. Mom sat in the living room surrounded by her friends, women in their 70s wearing expensive jewelry and carrying designer handbags. They were discussing their children's accomplishments. Cruises paid for by successful sons. Grandchildren at Harvard. Daughters who married doctors. And Adrian? One of them asked, glancing my way. What's he doing these days, Patricia? Mom's smile didn't waver. Oh, he's working. Doing his best. We keep hoping he'll find his footing eventually. The woman nodded sympathetically. It's hard when they don't live up to their potential. At least you have Caroline. I stood there holding a paper plate with birthday cake, invisible. After the party, I drove back to Houston. 3 hours on Interstate 10, windows down, trying to shake off the familiar feeling of erasure. My phone rang around midnight. It was Dr. Pamela Hughes, my colleague from Memorial. Adrian, sorry to call so late. I need you to cover my shift Thursday. Family emergency in Dallas. Thursday was supposed to be my day off, the first one in 2 weeks. But that's how it worked in our field. People's hearts didn't care about schedules. Of course, I said. Send me the details. You're a lifesaver. Literally. She laughed at her own joke. How was the family thing? Same as always. Your mom still telling people you pump gas? I'd mentioned it to Pamela once, during a late-night conversation in the doctor's lounge. She'd been furious on my behalf, wanted me to confront my mother publicly. Let it go, I told her. Some battles aren't worth fighting. But as I hung up and pulled into my apartment complex, I wondered if I'd been wrong. Maybe some lies needed to be challenged, no matter the cost. Thursday morning started with a 3-car pileup on Highway 59. 2 patients came in needing immediate surgery. I was in the operating room by 7, didn't come out until noon. The second patient had internal bleeding we almost missed. But we caught it, stopped it, saved him. His wife cried in the waiting room when I told her he'd make it. Those moments never got old. Between surgeries, I grabbed coffee in the doctor's lounge. The TV was on, some news program discussing healthcare costs. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Mom's book club is at her house today. She wants me to bring appetizers. Can you believe she expects me to cook? I didn't respond. Caroline's complaints about minor inconveniences were exhausting. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown Austin number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Dr. Wallace? The voice was professional, urgent. This is Vivian Torres from St. David's Medical Center in Austin. We have Patricia Wallace here. She's listed you as emergency contact. Can you get here soon? My heart stopped. What happened? She collapsed at her home during a social gathering. Possible cardiac event. She's stable right now, but we need family here. Are you her son? Yes. I'm in Houston. I can be there in 3 hours. Drive safely, doctor. She hung up. I stood in the lounge, coffee forgotten, mind racing. Mom had a heart condition? Since when? Why didn't Caroline tell me? Then I remembered Caroline's text from 10 minutes ago. Book club at Mom's house. The appetizers. My mother had collapsed in front of all those women who she'd spent years impressing. The irony was sharp and bitter. I grabbed my keys, told the charge nurse I had a family emergency, and headed for my car. During the drive, I called Caroline. She answered on the first ring, crying. Adrian, Mom's in the hospital. They said it's her heart. Preston's with the kids. I'm here alone and I don't know what to do. I'm on my way. What did the doctors say? They're running tests. Something about blockages. Adrian, what if she dies? I made it to St. David's in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Caroline was in the waiting room, mascara streaked, wringing her hands. She stood when she saw me, and for the first time in years, looked at me like I might actually be useful. They won't tell me anything, just that she's critical. Why won't they tell me more? Because you're not a doctor, I said gently. Let me talk to them. I found the charge nurse, showed my credentials, explained I was both family and a cardiovascular surgeon. Her expression shifted from polite to professional respect. Dr. Wallace, your mother has severe coronary artery disease. 3 major blockages. She needs emergency bypass surgery tonight, or she won't make it through the week. Who's the surgeon on call? Dr. Milton Graham. He's good, but he's in another surgery right now. Won't be available for at least 6 hours. 6 hours was too long. I'd seen cases like this. Waiting meant risk. Every minute increased the chance of another cardiac event, this one fatal. I can do it, I said. I'm qualified, and I'm here now. The nurse looked uncertain. Your family. That's usually against protocol. It's also against protocol to let a patient die when there's a qualified surgeon available. Call your hospital administrator. Get approval. But do it fast. She made the call. I stood there, heart pounding, realizing what I just volunteered for. I was about to operate on my mother, the woman who'd erased my entire career, who'd told everyone I was a failure. Now her life was literally in my hands. The administrator approved it within 20 minutes. They needed consent forms signed. Caroline had medical power of attorney, but she was barely functional. I found her in the waiting room and explained the situation calmly. Clinically, Mom needs immediate surgery, triple bypass. I can do it, or we can wait 6 hours for Dr. Graham. Waiting is dangerous. Caroline stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You're going to operate on Mom. Yes, I'm a cardiovascular surgeon. This is what I do. But Mom said you dropped out of medical school, that you work at a gas station in... She trailed off, realization dawning slowly. Caroline, I never dropped out. I've been a surgeon for 12 years. My sister's face went through several emotions. Confusion, disbelief, anger, embarrassment. That's not possible. Mom wouldn't lie about something like that. She did. For 23 years. I pulled out my phone, showed her my hospital ID from memorial articles I'd published, photos of me in surgical scrubs. Caroline's hands shook as she scrolled through the evidence. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you correct her? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was lying to make Mom look bad? She had no answer. The silence stretched between us, full of years of misunderstanding and deliberate deception. Finally, she looked up. Can you save her? Yes. Then do it. We'll talk about the rest later. She signed the consent forms with trembling hands. I changed into surgical scrubs, scrubbed in, and entered the operating room where my mother lay unconscious. The anesthesiologist, nurses, and surgical team were briefed. They knew the situation was unusual, but they were professionals. Personal history didn't matter once we started. What mattered was the surgery, the precision, the life on the table. I made the first incision with steady hands. Muscle memory took over. This was my element. Years of training, thousands of hours of practice, all leading to this moment. The surgery was textbook at first. Open the chest cavity, access the heart, prepare for bypass. But then we hit a complication. One of the arteries was more damaged than the scans showed. Calcified. Fragile. One wrong move and she'd bleed out. The room went quiet. Everyone waiting for my decision. Micro-instruments, I said. We're going delicate. For the next 2 hours, I worked with tools barely bigger than toothpicks, carefully cleaning the artery, placing the graft, ensuring every stitch was perfect. The anesthesiologist called out vitals. Heart rate steady. Blood pressure holding. She was stable but barely. One mistake and she'd crash. My back ached. My hands cramped. But I didn't stop. This wasn't just any patient. This was my mother, the woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, and then spent 2 decades pretending I didn't exist. I could save her or let her die. The choice was mine. But it wasn't really a choice. I'd taken an oath. First, do no harm. It didn't say, except if they hurt you first, or unless they deserve it. Said do no harm. Period. So I worked. Carefully, methodically, perfectly. I connected the grafts, restored blood flow, closed the chest. The surgery took 6 hours total. When I finally stepped back, The anesthesiologist smiled behind her mask. Beautiful work, Dr. Wallace. Textbook. Let's keep her monitored. She's not out of danger yet. I left the OR exhausted, hands aching, and found Caroline in the waiting room. She stood immediately, eyes red from crying. Is she okay? Surgery went well. She's in recovery. Next 24 hours are critical, but she should make it. Caroline collapsed back into her chair, sobbing with relief. Then she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Respect. You saved her life. I did my job. Adrian, I'm so sorry. For everything. For believing her. For treating you like you were nothing. I sat down next to her, suddenly exhausted. She's your mother. You believed what she told you. Mom woke up 18 hours later. I was in her room checking her vitals when her eyes fluttered open. She looked confused, disoriented, then saw me standing there in my white coat with my hospital ID clearly visible. Adrian. Her voice was raspy from the breathing tube. What are you doing here? I performed your surgery, Mom. Triple bypass. You had 3 blocked arteries. She tried to sit up, but the pain stopped her. That's not possible. You're not a doctor. I've been a doctor for 12 years. A surgeon for 10. Cardiovascular specialist for the last 5. I kept my voice calm, clinical. You had severe coronary artery disease. You collapsed at your book club. Caroline called me. I operated on you at St. David's Medical Center in Austin. Mom's eyes darted around the room, looking for Caroline, for someone to tell her this was wrong. You dropped out of medical school. You work at a gas station. No, Mom. That's what you told people. It was never true. She stared at me, and I watched her realize that her lies had finally caught up with her. The hospital called Caroline, but they also called me because I'm listed as your emergency contact. When I arrived and identified myself as a cardiovascular surgeon, they let me operate. I saved your life. The silence in that hospital room was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Mom's face cycled through emotions I couldn't fully read. Shame, anger, confusion, fear. Finally, she spoke. Why didn't you tell me? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Tell you? Mom, I graduated medical school. You didn't come to my graduation. I invited you to my white coat ceremony. You said you were busy. I sent you articles I published in medical journals. You never responded. I tried to tell you for years. You chose not to listen. But all those times at family gatherings, you never corrected me when I said you were working at a gas station. Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of lying? Of making things up to embarrass you? She had no answer. The machines beeped steadily, monitoring her healing heart. I spent 23 years building a career you pretended didn't exist, I said quietly. I saved lives, performed surgeries, earned respect from my colleagues. And you told everyone I was a failure. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Mom's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, not the performative kind she used at social gatherings. I was angry, she whispered. You chose medicine over business school. You chose a path I didn't want for you. And when you succeeded without my approval, it felt like you were rejecting me. So you rejected me first. Publicly. Repeatedly. I thought if I pretended you'd failed, maybe you'd quit. Maybe you'd come back and do what I wanted. But you never did. You just kept going, kept succeeding, kept proving me wrong. She coughed, winced at the pain. And I couldn't admit I was wrong. Not after telling everyone for so long. So I kept lying. And the lies got bigger. And I couldn't stop. I understood then that my mother's lies weren't about me. They were about her. About control, about image, about refusing to admit she'd lost the battle over my life choices. The worst part, I said, is that you missed everything. My accomplishments, my struggles, my life. You created this fictional version of me, and you loved hating him more than you loved the real me. The next 3 days were a blur. Mom recovered steadily, which was good news medically. But emotionally, our family was in chaos. Caroline visited daily, bringing flowers and apologies. She'd gone home and told Preston everything. He'd been shocked, then angry on my behalf. "I can't believe we treated you that way," Caroline said on the third day. "All those family dinners where we acted like you were the disappointing one, when really you were saving lives." "It's not a competition," I said. "You have a good career too, a good family." But I believed Mom's lies without question. I never once asked you directly about your life. I just accepted her version. That hurt more than Mom's lies, actually. That my own sister hadn't cared enough to verify the truth. But I could see she was genuinely remorseful, so I let it go. "We move forward from here," I said. "That's all we can do." Mom's friends from book club started visiting. They'd been there when she collapsed, had ridden with her in the ambulance. Now they came with flowers and concerned faces. The first visitor was a woman named Beatrice, one of Mom's oldest friends. She bustled into the room with a massive bouquet and stopped dead when she saw me checking Mom's chart. "Oh, you must be the doctor," she said. "Patricia's been telling us how wonderful you've been." Mom looked uncomfortable. I waited to see what she'd do. "Beatrice, this is my son, Adrian." Beatrice's face went blank with confusion. "Your son? But I thought your son worked at a gas station." "Patricia, you've been telling us for years that he dropped out of medical school." The room went silent. Mom's face turned red. "I was wrong," Mom said quietly. "Adrian is a doctor, a surgeon. He performed my bypass surgery." Beatrice looked between us, clearly trying to understand. "But you said he was a disappointment, that he'd wasted his potential." "I lied," Mom said, and I heard something break in her voice. "I lied about everything, and he saved my life anyway." Beatrice left shortly after, clearly uncomfortable. But by evening, the whole book club knew. The same women who'd heard years of stories about my failures now knew the truth. The calls started that night. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly wanting to reconnect. Cousins who'd ignored me at family gatherings now sent apologetic texts. An aunt called Caroline, demanding to know why they'd been lied to for so long. "This is humiliating," Caroline told me. "Everyone's asking questions. Mom's friends are gossiping. The whole family is talking about it." "Good," I said. "Let them talk. Aren't you angry? Don't you want to scream at someone?" I thought about it. Was I angry? Yes. But more than that, I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being invisible. Tired of letting other people's opinions define my worth. "I'm mostly sad," I told Caroline. "Sad that it took Mom almost dying for the truth to come out. Sad that we wasted 23 years on lies. Sad that it has to be this way." Caroline cried on the phone. "Can we fix this? Can our family ever be normal?" "I don't know, but we can try." On the 5th day, Mom was moved out of ICU into a regular room. Her recovery was ahead of schedule. Her heart was healing well. But our relationship was still broken. We talked, but carefully, like strangers learning each other's language. "Your father would be proud of you," Mom said one afternoon. "He always believed you'd do something important." It was the first time she'd mentioned Dad in years. "He wanted to be a doctor too," I said. "Did you know that? Before he went into accounting, he'd wanted medicine. But his family couldn't afford medical school." Mom nodded slowly. "He told me once, when you said you wanted to be a doctor, I think I saw it as you choosing his dream over mine. Like you were picking him over me." "I was picking myself, Mom. My own dream. It just happened to align with Dad's." "I know that now." She picked at her hospital blanket. "I've had a lot of time to think this week. About why I did what I did. About how much damage I caused. And I don't have a good excuse. I was selfish. I wanted you to be what I wanted. And when you refused, I punished you. I punished you for having the courage I never had." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I always wanted to be a writer," Mom said quietly. "When I was young, before I met your father, I wrote stories, sent them to magazines. Got rejection after rejection. Eventually, I gave up. Married your father, had you and Caroline, became the person everyone expected me to be." She looked at me with clear eyes. When you chose your own path despite my disapproval, it reminded me of my own cowardice. I resented you for succeeding where I'd failed. Not at medicine, but at being brave. It was the most honest thing she'd ever told me. You could still write, I said. You're 71, not dead. She smiled sadly. Maybe. Or maybe some dreams have expiration dates. Or maybe some dreams just hibernate until we're ready for them. We sat in silence. Outside the window, Austin traffic hummed past. Life continuing despite our small family drama. I want to make this right, Mom said. I want to tell everyone the truth. Really tell them. Not just admit I lied, but explain why. Apologize properly. That's a start, I said. But Mom, the person you really need to apologize to is yourself. Mom went home after 8 days. Caroline and Preston set up a bedroom downstairs so she wouldn't have to climb stairs. I visited twice a week, checking her recovery, adjusting her medications. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something resembling a relationship. She started telling people the truth. Not all at once, but gradually. At her next book club meeting, she brought photos of me from medical school, articles I'd published, proof of the life she denied. Some friends were supportive. Others drifted away, uncomfortable with the deception. Mom's bridge group dissolved entirely when 3 women decided they couldn't trust her anymore. I deserve that, Mom told me. I lied to them for years. Why should they believe anything I say now? Trust takes time to rebuild, I said. But at least you're trying. The family dynamics shifted too. Caroline became protective of me at gatherings, shutting down any questions that felt intrusive. Cousins who'd ignored me suddenly wanted to hear about my work. My nephew Marcus started asking about becoming a doctor himself. Uncle Adrian, is surgery scary? He asked at Thanksgiving. Sometimes, I told him honestly, but it's also the most amazing thing I've ever done. Knowing you saved someone's life, that they get to go home to their family because of your work, that's worth any fear. Marcus nodded seriously. Caroline smiled at me across the table, genuinely proud. Mom sat at the head of the table, quieter than usual. But when she caught my eye, she mouthed thank you. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. After dinner, Mom asked me to help her in the kitchen. We stood side by side washing dishes in silence. I'm writing again, she said suddenly. Stories, memories, trying to understand why I did what I did. Maybe I'll never publish them, but I need to write them down. That's good, Mom. That's really good. She handed me a wet plate. I wrote about you, about the lies, about watching you graduate medical school while pretending I didn't see it. Can I read it someday? Someday, when I'm brave enough. We finished the dishes together. It was the most peaceful moment we'd shared in 23 years. 6 months after the surgery, I got a call from St. David's Medical Center. They wanted to interview me for a documentary they were creating about unusual surgical cases. Your mother has agreed to participate, the producer said. She wants to tell the story, the whole story. We thought it would be powerful. I agreed. We filmed on a warm spring day. Mom sat in her living room, the same room where she'd collapsed. She looked directly at the camera and told the truth. I lied about my son for 23 years. I told everyone he was a failure when he was actually a brilliant surgeon. And when I needed him most, when my heart was failing, he saved my life without hesitation. Her voice cracked. I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I'm grateful every day that he's a better person than I ever was. They interviewed me too, asked why I'd operated on her despite everything. Because she's my mother, I said simply. Because I'm a doctor. Because saving lives is what I do, regardless of personal history. And because sometimes, the most radical act is choosing kindness when you have every reason to choose otherwise. The documentary aired 3 months later. It went viral, shared across social media, and discussed on morning talk shows. People debated whether I was a saint or a fool, whether Mom deserved forgiveness, whether family loyalty should override personal hurt. I didn't watch the comments. I didn't need to. I knew what mattered. Mom and I had coffee every Tuesday now. We talked about real things, small things, hard things. She showed me her writing sometimes. Stories about her own mother, about growing up in the 60s, about dreams deferred. They were good, really good. Caroline joined us sometimes. We were learning to be siblings again, not competitors for Mom's approval. Marcus decided he wanted to be a doctor. I promised to mentor him when he was older. Last week, Mom called me. Not Caroline first, but me. Adrian, I finished something. Piece of writing. I want you to read it. She emailed it that night. It was titled The Surgeon I Tried to Erase. I read it sitting in my apartment, tears streaming down my face. She'd captured everything. The lies, the pride, the fear. The moment she woke up and realized her son had saved her despite everything. The last line read, "He gave me back my life. Now I'm trying to give him back his mother." I called her immediately. "Mom, this is beautiful. You should publish it." "You think so?" "I know so." 6 months later, her essay appeared in a major magazine. People read it, shared it, discussed it. She did interviews, started a blog, began working on a memoir. At 72, she'd finally found her voice. And I'd finally found my mother. Not the one I'd wanted. Not the one I'd dreamed of. But the real one, flawed and trying. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.